$118 billion lost annually to failed payments, and my friend Jesus is here today to talk about how you can minimize that happening in your business. And so today we're going to talk about a super important topic, and that is about doubling down on your failed payment recovery as we come into this next year. And as we're looking to the landscape ahead, I think it's a super important area that I don't want to say is often overlooked, but there's so much more opportunity in there. And I want to talk about, and I think we should just dive right into it because there's such valuable information here for our audience. As we're looking towards the future, what are some of the top reasons for payment failures right now? What are you guys seeing? And as you know, if you can tell us a little bit about what Vindicia does too within the context of that, I think that's going to be super helpful for our audience to understand.
Thanks, Paul. I think it's a great question. Before jumping into some of the reasons on why the payment failed, let's just to put the audience on some perspective on the magnitude of the problem. The global industry is looking at payments income or revenue growing into about $2.6 trillion a year. But that's great. It's an explosive growth, despite recession in some countries and economic slowness in others. But it's a great growth. But on the other hand, the industry is seeing about $118 billion associated with failed payments a year. So it's a huge problem for the industry to solve. And when we look at failed payments, you also need to look at passive churn. So many companies focus really a lot of efforts and investment on addressing active churn, and they should. But passive churn is always 30 to 45% component of the overall churn. Wow. And a big component of passive churn is the failed payments, which represent a significant portion of that passive churn. Now, you asked me, what are the main reasons on payments fail? To be honest, there is multiple reasons. If you look at what we call decline codes, on that decline codes are the codes associated with the reason why the payment failed, and we get that from payment processors. There are more than 60, 70 different decline codes. So the payment failure, it could be associated about an account that is closed, the wrong credit card. But what we try to address is technical failures for valid payment methods that the subscriber provide to the merchant, and at some point when that payment is processed, it failed. And again, there are many technical reasons on why that payment failed. It could be temporary insufficient funds in the account. It could be not updated zip code. Multiple reasons that could be associated with that. So what we do in Vindicia is we address that with a service we call Vindicia Retain. And, depending on how sophisticated the merchant is, they process their recurrent billing. And if you look at data from Visa, every time that a merchant processes recurrent billing, in average, the first time they do, 23% of those payments fail. Wow. Which is a significant amount. Now, most merchants has their own retry process and logic to recover some of those failed payments. And they do that on their own, in-house, in their billing platform, or through their billing partner that they already have. And they recover the majority of those. So depending on how sophisticated a merchant is, they could be, after all the retry process, at a 90% authorization rate, or could be 98, 97% authorization rate if they are very good at it. But what we do, it doesn't matter if we get that 10% left from that 90% authorization rate merchant, or we get 3% left from that 87% authorization rate merchant. We then get those terminally failed payments. We apply our machine learning AI platform and represent that to the same payment processor that they presented a transaction before. And we managed to recover for them anywhere between 10 to 40% of those failed payments in the first place, which is great because when we do that, we advise the customer not to contact the consumer. So we do that in an automated way behind the scenes. So the consumer that was originally impacted on that failed payment really didn't even notice that the payment failed in the first place. And their subscription continues without any friction.
Yeah. And so did you say earlier, did I hear you right saying failed payments is $118 billion? Is that right?
Yeah, globally,
That's a
globally,
massive.
that's the amount.
Yeah. So 10 to 40% of that, of improving something like that, it starts to become a really big number.
Correct. And this is a problem that is known in the industry. Of course, different players in the industry are trying to address that in different ways. So if you talk to payment processors, of course, they are working on their platform to improve the authorization rates.
Yeah.
The billing platforms are improving their own algorithms to improve that. But yeah, today is a significant problem in the industry.
Now you're ahead of the curve in 2021 in approaching the conversation about artificial intelligence and machine learning. In AI obviously being a big buzz term nowadays. You were well ahead of it 2 years ago in terms of the conversation. Tell me how that's affecting those recovery rates and helping with that process as well. How are you guys applying AI and machine learning to your technologies to help enhance that even further?
Yeah, it's another great question, and part of the answer is the same way that we communicate that to some of our merchants. So many merchants are good at what they do in terms of recovering failed payments and ask the question why we can do better. And there are two reasons for that. One is we have doing this for 20 years. So part of what we do is our platform is fed with failed payments through the past 20 years across hundreds of merchants. So we have a data set that is more richer than a single merchant, no matter how large they are, because they only have visibility to the failed payments on their own. And that tied to our AI built in our platform allow us to have a more effective algorithm to reprocess or represent those payments for authorization. And that's very important because the payment ecosystem is changing very, very rapidly. It's very dynamic.
Yeah.
So unless you have the AI capabilities to be able to adapt the way that you represent those payments, you're not going to be able to keep up and help the customers, in our case, help our customers to increase their authorization rates.
Yeah. And so now talking about the authorization rates and talking about metrics, how do companies know if they're addressing passive churn the right way? Is there a specific metric that they should be working towards and looking at? You mentioned earlier that 10 to 40% improvement range that you're seeing there. Are there some metrics for success companies should be looking at?
Well, I mean, there are metrics, but I don't think there is a size fits all, right? Okay. From that perspective, is really, I think, is based on their own business and whether that's a big contribution or not for their business. So, few examples of that. We have merchants that are or customers that are in the digital publishing area, newspaper, magazines. And if you follow the digital subscriptions for newspaper and magazines, is an interesting and alarming metric that for new subscribers that they sign up, about 40 to 50% of them cancel their subscription or churn after only 4 to 5 months of subscriber originally. So you have some cost of acquisition, and then now you probably was not able to recover that cost of acquisition because they churn 4 to 5 months. And for them, it's very critical to maintain those subscribers. So they work on the active churn part, but we can help them on the passive churn part to make sure that we mitigate that problem. And we have very high success rate on digital publishing, and we help many of our customers on that front. In the other hand, we have other clients that are large global SaaS application and software businesses, multi-billion-dollar corporations, and they are very effective at what they do. They are getting 97% authorization rate on their own, but they are publicly traded, and for them, it's very important that we can help them with few basis points to increase that 97 to 97.5, 98%.
Yeah.
At the scale that they work, it's very important to have that because it's not only about recovering the revenue of that failed subscription payment that you lost, but we did a study with Forrester that they did for us about 6 months ago. And interviewing some merchants, they identified that it's not only about the revenue that you recover, but once that subscription payment is recovered, because that subscriber never meant to cancel or suspend the subscription, the merchant is able to bill that subscriber for another 4 to 5 billing cycles. So we're also extending the lifetime value of that subscription.
Wow. And that's huge. I mean, those additional 4 to 5 billing cycles, and and so when you look at those metrics, it's really just across the board. It's about what you said, reiterating what you said here. It's about what works for the organization, because every type of subscription, every type of organization is going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, and for some of them, it's about customer experience as well, right? And again, going back to particular verticals, many of our clients are in a subscription space that their service that they provide is not a necessity, it's not a basic service. So we're looking at video streaming and other type of leisure content and services. So when you have a subscription that is $5 to $10 cost, you don't want to contact the consumer because one of the payments failed trying to get an alternative payment method.
Right.
Because with all the competition that is in the market for alternative content, that consumer may decide, because they are probably not using that service that frequently, may decide to cancel in that moment instead of providing you an alternative payment method. So if you can recover that payment in a frictionless way without contacting the consumer, it's a way to continue to provide the service to the consumer that they never meant to cancel, but if they are in that moment of providing an alternative payment, they may take the decision to cancel.
So that's interesting. You kind of walked me into my next question, which was the best practices and the tactics to reduce passive churn there. So it sounds like for you within there, is it finding ways to use the systems to help reduce that versus having to go to contact the customer first? Because you're reducing I guess the right way to say, maybe reducing the friction for the customer and the inconvenience of having to enter a new card. Is that kind of where you're walking down that path?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, as I mentioned, the preferred best practice, and that's what we recommend to our customers, is after you finish your own retry process, don't contact the consumer until you exhaust all your resources on that. So, of course, it depends on what is the lapse period that each of them can work with, depending on the industry and their own business policies in terms of suspending that subscription or not. But what we recommend is send us the transaction, give us the time to do the retries and help you recover some of that. In that way, that portion of the subscribers continue with the subscription without noticing and no friction. And of course, for those that we cannot recover, then you can start your process of donning and contacting them via email or phone calls to engage them and try to get an alternative payment method. But of course, if you are applying that technique at the end of the process, after we do our part, we always recommend to also have a engagement strategy with that consumer for active churn, because you don't want just an isolated touch point with the customer on the negative context for the payment. You want to be engaged with them before on news, promotions, new content that is coming. So when you contact them for the payment, it is not isolated and doesn't create more of a negative context around that.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you look at the industry ahead and where the subscription business is going, what do you see as the top priorities for subscription businesses growth coming into 2024 here?
Well, I think you can see that more and more merchants are either evolving towards a subscription model or launching a line of business that is based on subscription.
Yeah.
So subscription memberships, but trying to create that long time relationship with subscribers. So I think that will continue. But what is critical and it was accelerated in the past 2 years after the pandemic and after recession alarms in North America and in other countries is the growth, depending on the vertical that you are, is not going to be as explosive as it used to be. And now you need to drive a lot of your efforts on addressing churn, retaining your subscriber base. Because as you know, it's a lot cheaper to retain a subscriber than acquiring new subscribers. So if you base your model on only or the majority acquiring new subscribers, it's a very expensive value proposition. So you need to focus on retaining the subscriber. And of course, there are multiple strategies for that to address retention. Active churn strategies are very important, but we believe that because of the economic pressures that consumers have, the failed payments is something that could increase as a problem for the industry and for merchants. And you need to have strategies in place to address that, failed payments and how you're going to solve them.
Yeah. And as consumers are tightening their belts more, we see, Chase recorded recently, went on record saying that consumers' bank account balances are getting lower than ever before, again, back to pre-pandemic levels. So you're probably going to see more failed payments from there in between. People are bouncing paycheck to paycheck a little bit more now. So it sounds like this is going to be a more time than ever to deploy a solution that's going to help manage that for you, I'd imagine.
Absolutely.
Yeah. A lot of great information here today, and I'll recap some of it here in a second. But any other final piece of advice for our audience as we explore this topic today?
No, I think the only additional comment is we are a firm believer that every merchant has or is doing their best on the retry process. But don't be afraid of reaching out to external partners like us to help you supplement what you do. We are a firm believer that every merchant needs to do their best effort to improve what they do on their own and do their best. But whatever you cannot recover, don't be afraid to reach out to an external partner to help you supplement that effort and increase your authorization rate before you start talking to the consumers.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point, right? This is, it's not like these consumers want to leave or trying to cancel. Maybe there's some friction point somewhere with either an invalid balance or failed, credit card, whatever it may be. That is, they want to stay subscribed to what you're doing. They want to be part of that relationship they have with the brand still, and reaching out to a company like Vindicia to help find ways to improve that certainly isn't doing any harm, right? It's helping the process all around. Jesus, we talked about that today. We talked about the metrics that companies should be looking at. We went down the path of, really it's what's best for those businesses. And there's all sorts of different areas of opportunity. If you're a multi-million-dollar organization, that 1% can make a huge difference. Or if you're just, in growth mode, you could maybe see that 10 to 40% improvement in there. And it's a great opportunity. And it's about, engaging, continuous engagement with the customers in other areas. So you don't have to worry about engaging with them on that failed payment side, because you want to maintain and build that relationship. Addressing churn is going to be important, more so now than ever before. And I'm so happy that you shared this with our audience today. Jesus, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks, Paul. Thanks for the time today. Really enjoyed our conversation.
If you really enjoyed our content here today, make sure you like, follow, subscribe, comment, all the great things that are involved with wherever you may find this video. And always stay tuned to SUBTA Studios for more great content to help your subscription business.